Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. I just want to thank all of you for joining us for today's event. My name is Jackie Lombardi. I'm the Director of Justice at Chiefs of Ontario. The title of this event, hosted by Chiefs of Ontario, is Positive Collaboration Between First Nations and the Mining Sector. This press conference will help facilitate crucial discussions between First Nations, industry representatives, and government officials. Ontario is home to many of the critical resources in Canada. It is also home to First Nations who have lived on this land since time immemorial. As global demands for critical minerals surge and the trade war with the United States approaches, it is now more important than ever for governments and industry proponents to work with First Nations in a way that respects their jurisdiction, sovereignty, title, and inherent in treaty rights, and preserves First Nations heritage so that projects can be mutually beneficial. I'm joined today by Chief Shelley Moore-Frappier of Temagami First Nation, Jason Batiste, Executive Director of the Waban Tribal Council, Chief Jason Gauthier of Missanabie Cree First Nation, and Anishinaabe Nation Lake Huron Regional Chief Scott McLeod. The format for today's event will be that each leader will have a few minutes to introduce themselves and touch on some key points. Then we will open it up for a Q&A from the media and the audience. We'll be uploading this to the Chiefs of Ontario YouTube channel, and there is a Zoom option available for accredited media. For more information, you could also visit Chiefs of Ontario's website. So now we will begin. Thank you. Chief Moore-Frappier.
Kwe, Giwe no kwe Nadishnakaza Dikandodem, Tamiaga Anishinaabe, Kwe and Dao. I'm Chief Shelley Moore-Frappier of Temagami First Nation. When I introduce myself in the language, I talk about where I'm from. I'm Anishinaabe, but specifically I'm a Tamiaga Anishinaabe. That talks about the relationship that I've had to the people and to the land for millennia. This is what we are talking about when we're talking about inherent rights. What gives us our inherent rights? And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about the M&O versus First Nations. Because what the Métis Nation of Ontario has done is asserting themselves. So we're talking about assertions versus rights. And that's a really important distinction because our rights come from our relationship to the land and our relationship to each other. And that is something that I would say is new to the M&O, as there have only been in existence since 2017 as a corporation. So it becomes very problematic when we are dealing with proponents who are treating us like we have equal rights, because that is simply not the case. This has been for Temagami. We have a outstanding. I don't want to call it a land claim, but the Crown has an outstanding fiduciary obligation to us. And recently, Ontario has been giving the M&O I don't want to say the rights because they're not rights, but they were allowing them to be in our territory without our permission. That is ongoing right now. M&O has taken their cabin down that is in our territory, but we're still looking at legally challenging their rights in our territory. So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about these rights versus assertions. And we have to be really careful about our relationships because we want to be building meaningful relationships with proponents. And to build meaningful relationships, we have to understand both the people and the place and the experiences of the people. This is really important as we move forward, because we're only going to move forward at the speed of trust. So to do that, we need to build meaningful relationships. And that understanding is really critical to that. So, yeah, I think I'm going to, I know there's a lot of different instances that are going to be brought forward, so I'll leave that at that, and thank you for this opportunity.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Jackie, thank you for setting up this conference in such short order. I know the Waban Tribal Council, in particular, where I'm from, my name is Jason Batiste. I'm the Executive Director at the Waban Tribal Council, and I represent 6 First Nation communities in the heart of gold mining country in Ontario. Our communities are immersed in the industry, and we thought it was important to bring a message to this group, to the industry group gathered here in Toronto, about dealing with the proper rights holders, about dealing with First Nations who are historic rights holders on the land. There's nobody else. And I think Chief Frappier was being very diplomatic in her response to her community's challenges by the Métis Nation of Ontario. I won't be so delicate. I'm here to tell you on Matachewan's behalf, on behalf of Brunswick House and Chapleau Ojibwe and Matachewan, and Matagami and Flying Post, that there are no historic Métis in our territories. There are none. They don't exist. And yet, Ontario government insists, the Ontario government policy insists that we engage with them, that the industry engage with them. We talked about critical minerals and all the challenges with the tariffs and the things that are going on, and then you throw illegitimate communities on engagement into that ointment. And the work of industry becomes even more difficult to deal with the rights, the proper rights holders in our First Nations. In our territories, the Waban communities have 12 impact benefit agreements. We have hundreds of MOUs, exploration agreements with junior miners. We have found a path forward with industry. It's not perfect, it's a negotiation. There are a lot of things that we have to do to make sure that our relationships work with industry, but we get it done. And now you throw in illegitimate communities. It turns our communities against one another. It turns us against industry, because we don't want it's what the engagement with the MNO does. If, for example, they do an IBA like our communities and they become a rights holder at a mine through an impact benefit agreement, they get a foothold. Industry legitimizes their presence, and we simply can't have that. I want to say this too, that the communities have done the research for the province. MNO has made some claims, they did some research, and we've called it out as bogus. Both the Robinson Huron Treaty Organization, the Waban Tribal Council, and others have done long academic research debunking the idea of Métis presence in our territories. And believe me, we're not against the Red River Métis where they exist. We're not talking about the rights of what I'm going to describe as the real Métis, and sorry, I don't know how else to put it. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Métis Nation of Ontario. I'm talking about communities that did not exist. And I see my Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler, and he put it best when we were at the INAN Committee in Ottawa. And what he said to the INAN Committee is, our ancestors, if there was another community of Indigenous people in our territories, we'd have known it, because our elders would have seen their fires. We'd have recognized them. We'd have talked to them. We'd have engaged with them. But Ontario, we're telling you, Canada, they do not exist in this province. So I want to take it back to a mining focus. And our communities are here to help. We've found ways to engage. There are certainly challenges in the Ring of Fire, I get that. But I implore Ontario and Canada to simply deal with the real rights-bearing First Nations, because there is nobody else. So I hope I've offended some and not some others, but I do get a little bit impassioned about this because it's a real ongoing live issue in our communities and it needs to stop. So, miigwech for your time.
The trouble with going through third is a lot of things have already been said. There is a legal duty to consult First Nations. Most First Nations in Ontario have rights protected by treaties. First Nations have been here for thousands or time immemorial, and we're not going away. First Nations have formed productive and mutually beneficial working relationships with the mining companies for many years. First Nations have focused on responsible protections of their lands and way of life and shared benefits for activities with our respective territories. M&O has no lands. It simply claims First Nation lands in order to extract benefits. It has no entitlement to. Miigwech.
Anin Kinawea, Zongabwe Dijnakas. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott McLeod. I'm the Lake Huron Regional Chief of the Anishinaabe Nation, who represents 39 First Nations throughout Ontario. I've tried not to duplicate anything that was said before me, but there are a few things that I do want to go over. And one is that Canada and Ontario are even including the Métis Nation of Ontario in consultation processes in areas where the Ontario M&O haven't even made any false claims yet. So they're being included in every aspect of it. Looking at impact benefit agreements with industry. I'm not even sure how that's possible when you don't have a land base. If you don't have a land base, how could you have impacts when the mining exploration is being conducted? M&O's received significant funding already for mining and development consultation and initiatives, IBA's resource revenue sharing. A growing body of evidence, however, demonstrates that the M&O's claims aren't based in facts or even evidence. Canada and Ontario are making a decision to retroactively create Métis communities that never existed, as Jason has said earlier. The Crown's recognition and demand for M&O's new historic communities to be consulted is a policy decision that is not based in credible evidence or meeting the legal test set by the Supreme Court of Canada in the Powley case. I just want to end by saying that Ontario and Canada have been in the news lately with the talk about tariffs, talking about mining and minerals as if the First Nations have not signed treaties with them. They are also not acknowledging the rights that exist from those treaties and talk about these lands to foreign governments as if they're barren, as if there's no title to First Nations. We come here with a message. Firstly, to Canada, Ontario, this issue is not going away. The illegitimate recognition of the M&O must be addressed. To the industry, do not waste your money by signing impact benefits agreements with organizations that you are not required to do so. But instead, you are to deal with the First Nations of those territories, in which case you have an obligation, duty to consult with us and sign those impact benefit agreements with the land's rights title holders. So with that, I want to say thank you and miigwech, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, speakers. We'll now begin the Q&A portion of our event. Go ahead.
From the Trillium. Can we talk a little bit about what exactly the province is requiring mining companies to do with the M&O? We've talked about impact exactly are the rules the province has put forward with regards to dealing with the M&O? What are they actually forcing to happen?
So this all stems from the government's position on duty to consult with First Nations and rights holders in Ontario and the rest of Canada for that matter. But the problem is the recognition in 2000, I think it was 17, under the Wynne government gave openly recognition to the MNO without any due diligence or research on who these people were, who this organization was. And first of all, the misuse of them being a nation, they are a crown corporation. And they are made up of a mismatch of people that may have some Indigenous ancestry, may not, but they are not a nation, and they have no land rights, title, or claims to our lands. And so that becomes the problem, is that recognition piece that they need to walk back.
But just to be clear, the province isn't telling mining companies they need to consult with the MNO. They are? They are. They are? Okay. Yes, they are. So every mining company is required, if there's one of those historical communities that the MNO talks about, they're required to deal with the MNO? That's correct. Okay. And so you guys are saying not to do that?
We're saying not to do that. And we would push that and back industry on the legal challenges around that, because we strongly feel, we don't feel, we know that these MNO and all these pop-up organizations that are claiming to be Métis are not legitimate and have no claim in our territories.
Right. I was at a session at the conference with the Mining Association of Canada President Pierre Breton, and his point was, when it comes to Indigenous involvement in mining, they just want to know what the rules are. So is this going to be one of the rules, you will pull out of projects if they are signing agreements on the side with the MNO?
Well, I can't speak for all the First Nations across Ontario, but one of the things is, we use the term rule loosely. This is a policy that was established that they're following. It is not a law. It has not been tested. It is being challenged currently. And let's be honest here. The mining industry has been, trying to be good corporate citizens when it comes to dealing with First Nations. So one of the issues is that most of our First Nations don't have the capacity to be dealing on a daily basis with the influx of mining requests and impact benefit. They're dealing with drinking water. They're dealing with childcare. You have an organization that's well equipped, such as the MNO, to slip in there while First Nations are busy taking care of their social problems and sign these agreements. And to industry, it's a box that they simply check that, we consulted with the Indigenous people, but they haven't. And that's what we're here to tell them.
Is there an example of someone pulling out of a deal or project because the MNO became involved?
We have advised mining partners in our region that if they're going to do deal with the Métis, they may not get to a deal with nations. So pick your poison. And it's not, deal with, that's my message today, deal with the rights holders, the real rights holders. What Ontario is doing now, and this is a specific project that we just ran into last year, is sort of at a community of Flying Post in the middle. It's a very remote place. And sort of in the middle of nowhere, you've got this supposed Métis community that's been put on the same level of consultation as a project that's right beside the First Nations border. How does that work? Where is the community? And I invited my good friend, Minister Peary, he's from Timmins, he's the Minister of Mines for Ontario, and we are good friends. And I have a very good relationship with him. And I asked George, I said, George, you and I one day need to take a walk out to this Métis community, and you're going to show it to me. You're going to show me the impacts from this mining project that are supposedly going on to this community, because there's nothing there. It's just the First Nation boundary. So why is Ontario putting the duty to consult at the same level with a non-existent falsely created community that's been ginned up. Oh, well, but, you know, my point is, that, to your question, Ontario is treating them as equals, and they don't even exist, and that's got to stop. And the Waban Tribal Council, our communities have taken on the investment. We're going to court. We're talking about protecting the rights of First Nations, because if MNO can do it, what's next? Who else wants to be Indigenous? Put up your hand, go ahead, why not? They'll policy you in. And then our rights get watered down and we go away. And so we have to protect that. In the Waban Tribal Council, we've invested over $1 million of our own money in legal fees to challenge this, and we're preparing to take the fight as far as we can.
Why do you think the Ontario government is putting so much money and time into this when they aren't showing up at the table to actual treaty meetings and other things? I mean, forgetting onus of industry, it seems the Ontario government is at the heart of this problem. Why do you think they're putting their money and investment into this and not the actual treaty?
I think the short answer is because it's the easiest avenue for them to go to get some Indigenous buy-in into this. But unfortunately, the Indigenous people that they're using are not Indigenous people. And so they're fast-tracking development through these, yeah, we talked to the Indigenous people and they're all in favor. But they haven't talked to us.
I'm the Director of Natural Resources and Environment there, and this has been a big issue for us over the years, and great concern that we share with everyone here today. Some things that I've called this process is modern colonization, also that it's the real bulldozer that we're dealing with right now, because Ontario is utilizing this process to check their boxes easily without having to go through all the in-depth consultation with we're river people, we're loud. But no, it's, as I said, modern colonization, and we define it as a real bulldozer because it's giving Ontario the right to push these projects forward and, you know, circle back to some of these bigger documents of the Constitution, you know, anything that mentions the Métis. So they're really expanding that net so they can easily go through and enter our areas. And in court, it's going to look like they've done their job. So it is a real issue. We really need to push back. They too have tried to claim areas in Martin Falls, and Councillor Rob just walked in, but they are trying to assert themselves in our areas, and it's like going through, you know, trauma all over again, because we are being told we're not a people of the land, that there are other people coming in, and it's another form of trauma. It's very hard on our people because we're like, there are no Métis in our area. There are still no Métis in our area, and that's the way that we see it as First Nation. Like, something has to be done because it is getting out of control. Whatever court cases are happening, you know, very good. We would jump on board at any moment for that, but it is. It's not okay. One more point I want to make is when we get mining claims, they're CC'd to the Métis. Why? You know, their mining claims are not CC'd to us. So what is really going on here? It's insulting, it's fraudulent, and something needs to be done.
Yeah, and we've heard, you know, many times along the same lines that you talked about, is that this is assimilation 2.0. If everybody's Indigenous, nobody's Indigenous. And that's what we're seeing real time. But when getting back to the Ontario and Canada, you know, willing to deal, you know, we can just look at the Restall case, right? The annuities case on the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850. It wasn't till they lost in court that they were willing to deal. So when you hear Mr. Ford out there talking about, you know, Ontario's resources, he's not talking about any obligations to any treaty. He's just talking as if they're his resources that he can deal with and make deals with without consulting us. And we're saying no. But the MNO is standing there with their hand out saying, yeah, we'll consult with you. We'll consult with you. But the MNO is not a nation. They are a crown corporation. And they are, like I said earlier, a mismatch of people who may or may not have some indigenous ancestor from the 1700s who are making false claims as if they were a nation all along and existed. There's evidence in Southern Ontario here of school boards where Métis Nation of Ontario has gotten access to change curriculum to show maps of the homelands of the MNO on their maps, teaching this to children. They are rewriting history this very day, and that has to stop.
I think the simple point is that if we're talking about lands and resources, you're only talking to First Nations because we are the only ones who have any rights in Ontario when it comes to lands and resources. This is not an Indigenous thing. This is about us as First Nations, the rights holders of the lands, and that's where the conversations need to be. We need to stop, using this blanket Indigenous in Ontario, because when we're talking about land rights and resources, we're talking First Nations, and there is, when we talk about the Métis Nation of Ontario, they don't have the collective rights like we do. They are looking at individuals who trace their lineage by the colonial record and try to call themselves a nation. And that is not nationhood. Nationhood comes from the long history of the relationship to both the land and the people. And that's, what we really need to be getting away from, this individualism and getting back to the collective rights, because that's how we hold them. So, miigwech.
Sorry, the fellow with the hat, and then Don.
Check.
Well, it's a tough issue, but I want to share with you a little piece of information that the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources practice, and that's called a shipment letter. And a shipment letter is a letter that is used for one First Nation to allow another First Nation out of their treaty or territory to come into their waters and fish. So, for example, if I was going to go and fish on your body of water, I would have to seek a shipment letter or a permission letter from your chief. And so what they're doing there is essentially saying First Nations have jurisdiction. Otherwise, why do they need a permission letter? They don't apply that to the MNO. MNO does not require a shipment letter to come into our territory and fish. Margaret Froh, who is from Saskatchewan, who has, I guess, Métis roots in Saskatchewan, can come into my territory and fish without a shipment letter, but you can't. That is the policy of the provincial government. And so that has to change. To the people in your community who are facing these, stand up for your rights, speak about them to conservation officers. It won't change overnight, but know the Chiefs of Ontario are fighting on your behalf to change this misrecognition of rights in our territories. Don? And I think, that again goes back to the message to the industry. Don't waste your money signing IBAs with these organizations, and let them take up a legal challenge with you, because they won't, because they don't have the backing behind, the historical backing, that they are in fact entitled to those impact benefit agreements. And we, the First Nations, will stand with industry to show them that we are the rights and title holders and that they need to be dealing with us. In Canada, Ontario has to walk back that 2017 recognition, which was done by the province at the time and just simply adopted by the federal government.
Let's go to the Canadian Press Online.
Hi, Chief McLeod. It's Alessia Kasupini from the Canadian Press. Nice to see you. I understand that the focus here has been mostly on the Métis Nation of Ontario, but Poilievre has said that he'll approve federal permits in the Ring of Fire. Ford has quipped that he shouldn't have to consult with First Nations hundreds of kilometers away. During the Liberal leadership races, First Nations were barely mentioned unless it was about natural resource development. If governments are moving away from consultation in the current form, is there not a message being sent to industry that they can do the same? And what's the plan here?
Well, you're right on that there is an underlying message, but there's also an underlying message in the Restool case and currently now in the Robinson Superior case on the annuities claim, which is based on our treaties, that they have to deal with us and that we do have and never have given up rights and titles to those lands. So not saying that it's going to be an easy road, especially with the a conservative government on the horizon, but we as Ontario First Nations, I'm not sure of how many other issues that we stood together on at 100% of all First Nations being on board in Ontario with taking the same position. So we're going to stand, we're going to fight on this, and we get a lot of support, not just in Ontario, but from other chiefs, other communities, other First Nations all across Canada, right to Vancouver, right to the East Coast on this same issue. So if they're looking to fight us on this issue, they're in for a big fight.
There's a follow-up. Go ahead.
Yeah, and on MNO now, I spoke with the new president of the Métis National Council last week and asked for an update on the expert panel on the 6 communities. They haven't said when that report will be released, despite it being due months ago. Wondering your thoughts on that.
I'd have to refer to our staff to see where that lies, but yeah, we were waiting to see the results on that as well. But as you know, there's been a lot of fallout with the Métis National Council and the Manitoba Métis Federation, and it's all surrounding the illegitimate claims of the MNO. And a lot of these actual Métis nations have pulled away because of it. So, I mean, just that in itself is telling of, the circumstances that we're dealing with here.
I just wanted to quickly respond to your first question about the Ring of Fire and Ontario's policy. I mean, we have a good relationship, at least from the Waban Tribal Council. We have no choice but to deal with the mining industry. They've been mining since 1906 in the backyard of my home community in Matachewan and in Kirkland Lake and in Timmins. So we've had to come to a compromise with the industry, and we hope that this government, the re-elected Ford government, continues to support our communities through resource revenue sharing. We have Chief Gauthier and I are both in the midst of a renegotiation of our, I think, best-in-class countrywide resource revenue sharing arrangement with the province. We want that deal back on the table, and we're working with Ontario to do that. But I will say, communities in the Ring of Fire, they move at a different pace, and they need to be respected with their pace. And Ontario needs to deal with them in the way that those communities need to be respected, in a way that they need to be worked with. Please don't lump us into sort of that same approach. We have a different attitude and a different way that we work with our industry and government partners. Of all stripes, whether it's Liberal, NDP, Conservative. Again, being in the heart of gold mining country in Timmins has, I think, given us, our communities, a better insight into the mining industry and a path forward to compromise so that our communities can benefit. And not just the First Nation communities, but the municipalities that are around us that also rely on in northeastern Ontario. You're a miner or you're a miner. There's not a lot else going on. The forest industry is challenged. It's the mining industry that keeps the lights on in the homes of where I live in Timmins. And I just wanted to, on the experts report, and the hand-picked people that the Métis National Council picked to do their own research, I encourage people to read it because they're coming up with the same conclusions that we are, that the MNO and others are simply not who they say they are. And that's why Manitoba left MNC, that Alberta and Saskatchewan are all questioning the motives of the Eastern Métis, the Métis Nation of Ontario and others, because their own experts are coming up with the same conclusions that we've drawn, that they simply don't exist as a historical fact in Ontario. Even though they tried to handpick their own experts and sort of gin up, research the way they did before, the way that MNO has done with Ontario. They make false claims, and their research is faulty and flawed, and we've exposed that. And so, for the media in the room, the reports are online from the Waban Tribal Council, the Robinson Huron Treaty Area. Read them. It exposes the entire fraudulence of what the Métis Nation of Ontario is doing, and I suspect that the reports that they might be doing with their expert panel, some of it says that it confirms our conclusions. And I'd encourage you to do your homework on that.
And just a further follow-up to the question about the expert panel. So as far as we know, the Métis National Council will not make all of the submissions to the expert panel public or provide a public response. The MNO has made all of its submissions to the expert panel public. You can find those on their website, and there's currently research underway that is examining the MNO's expert panel submissions. And then I'll also note that Saskatchewan has made their submissions public as well, so we're waiting to see if the MNC will. Let's now go to Karen from APTN.
Hi, thanks. I have a question and a follow-up. The first question is, I just want to know what led to this press conference coming out today? What's the urgent issue that made you decide to speak out?
For our communities, again, living in Timmins, working so proactively with industry and government, and all the stuff about tariffs and the international pressures that we're under, we want the mining industry to know that there's a consistent, safe place for responsible industry to operate with First Nation communities. But you need to make sure you're talking to the right folks. So we thought that this was an opportune time to get into this world-based conference where the industry comes to work and to talk and to consult and to learn about the things that we do. That's why we're here. And that's the message, is not necessarily for government today. I wanted to speak to our industry partners and let them know that we're here and we're with you. And as Chief McLeod had said, we'll stand shoulder to shoulder with you against false assertions of Indigenous communities that simply don't exist. And we've done that in our region. So that's why we're here today. The message is for the industry, that First Nations are ready to work with you, but you gotta take it upon yourself to work with the right folks.
And we have a follow-up from APTN.
Yes, I just want to get very straight on what it is that you're saying about the Métis Nation of Ontario, because there was a Supreme Court case in the Powley decision, which you referenced, that did recognize that the Sault Ste. Marie community, that I think forms the basis for the other communities being recognized. So I'm kind of hearing they have no land rights, they don't exist, their information is false. So I guess I'm asking, do you believe that Métis exist in Ontario? Or are you saying they don't exist, or they simply don't have land rights, or that they're not governments? Like, if you could just clarify.
Sure. One thing that I can say with the Powley court case decision is that based on the information in front of them, they made the best judgment on that case that they could. However, nobody questioned the research that was done before it. And the research was very one-sided and authored by the people who had interest in advancing this notion of Métis people in this country. So, the fault lies with the fact that in the Canadian judicial system, you can bring forth research that is not peer-reviewed. And I only found that out recently, that most academic papers that you would, look to be as sound and well-researched are peer-reviewed to make sure that the information in those reports or research papers are actually true. When it goes to the Supreme Court of Canada, it's not peer-reviewed. So the question is then to look at the research that was used in the Powley case, not necessarily the conclusion that was made in the Supreme Court of Canada, but what research were they basing it on, and is that research in fact legitimate? And that's where the question needs to be asked.
Maybe if I could just add to that, from our perspective in northeastern Ontario, Treaty Number 9, Sault Ste. Marie is a long way from my homeland, a long, 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 long way. How does it hold that a Métis community from Powley, if they exist, and I agree with Chief McLeod that the research is beyond faulty, but how do they then get rights in, we heard from the Ring of Fire, a place that you can't get to except for by helicopter? Yet the Métis Nation of Ontario claims that as their space, that they're impacted by projects that go on in the remote parts of our province. How does that hold? Even if the Powley case is, or they have this small community in Sault Ste. Marie that apparently they have some rights. Then from my point, then they're in Sault Ste. Marie. That doesn't put them in Matachewan. Doesn't put them in Flying Post. It certainly doesn't put them in Martin Falls or the Ring of Fire. But that's what they've done. Their map, the 7 historic Métis communities, it's not like a municipality or reserve that's confined into a small, like my home community of 10 square miles. It's everything. It's almost every square inch of this province. That's what they're calling a community. I don't understand it. Like, the policy, it's gone too far. And so to answer the question about, Powley is and should be maybe a small thing in Sault Ste. Marie, and let them be. But they ain't in Matachewan. And they're certainly not in the places of Treaty 9 that I know. So that would be my answer to that.
Well, I'm positive that Batchewana and Kitagan-Zibi would have a disagreement with that last statement. However, in the ruling of the Supreme Court Powley case, it was very explicit that it was talking about a very small geographic area, and it also put into works the Powley test, which is not being used for any verification in their registry or any of that. So basically, they just took the win as a win and said, we're everywhere. So like, these are the things that we really are uncovering with our research. And as Jason has said, those papers have been peer reviewed, and they are available for the public to look through either the Chiefs of Ontario or Jason's organization up in Matachewan. And so those are available. And more of those types of research papers and questions will be coming out.
We'll go to Fraser online.
Also, there's a lot going on today actually, and so there is actually, in about 15 minutes, a number of First Nations, I think included here, Matagabi, Matachewan, and Flying Post First Nations are going to announce the signing or moving towards signing an impact benefits agreement with Canadian Nickel on the Crawford project. Are you in support of that, I guess, or is that something you're more of?
I was just in conversation with the CEO, Mark Selby, yesterday. In fact, the 3 communities you referenced are members of our tribal council, and I think just demonstrate what I was saying earlier about our communities willing to come to the table and compromise with industry. We're talking about critical minerals. It's the buzz of the town. It's the buzz of the show. This large nickel deposit near Timmins. It's a challenging deposit, and Mr. Selby has a fundraising effort going on. But our communities are ready to work with that industry. We understand that we need to play a role in, say, helping develop critical minerals so that we all use every day. So we're up for that. So I appreciate the question, and the answer is yes, we're supportive of the operation. And it's not just the Waban communities that you referenced. There's also Taquatagamaw Nation and Apatippi, Anishinaabe that are also working with Canada Nickel. So, you know, as an example of industry getting it right, you know, here at this conference and engaging with First Nations in meaningful ways and creating lasting benefits to our communities while we extract resources that we, you know, that the communities rightly, you know, consider their own. And in a sharing way, as our treaty always said, we're working with industry as we speak. So we're happy that announcement's going forward while I'm talking to you.
Is there any further questions? I'm going to bring you the mic.
The microphone going? Okay, hello everyone. Kathy Brady here again from Martin Falls First Nation. I think it's just more of a comment going on, you know, the topic of the meeting here, and that's the message to industry. And our community wants to know, you know, or wants to express that dealing with the First Nations of the area is what is going to bring certainty to your projects. It's going to increase the, you know, solidity or whatever the word might be of the project. But if you start looking at First Nations that are traditional to the area, that are not signatories to Treaty 9, that do not have that historical context, then you're increasing the risk to your investors, you're increasing the risk to your projects, and down the line, it's quite likely that you'll end up in court. So it's crucial that you put the First Nations of the area first and not, you know, paint the whole area of the north with this Métis brush. I think it's also important to note that whether you want to call them the true Métis, that I really feel for them because of what they're dealing with people imposing their so-called historical background and, you know, kind of dragging along the true historic Métis into this process, that is just, I really feel for the actual Métis out there who are being dragged along this process that many of them don't agree with, some of my close friends as well. So I just wanted to have that message heard, and for industry not to get confused or, you know, having these so-called fake communities, or not so-called, but these actual fake communities, muddying the waters, that you are more secure with the First Nations of the areas, and that is the way to go. Just in a closing comment, for someone who's up in the Ring of Fire area, it's interesting to see how our government pays more attention to the rights of the Métis people who can't even show their homelands or their history in the area. Yet our First Nations, who may be 100 to 200 kilometers away, are told that they don't need to be consulted, as was, you know, announced in the media as of late. So there's a real confusion out there, you know, as to what's consultation and what's not. But it makes us raise eyebrows going, well, how come our neighbors on the rivers aren't treated with better respect than, you know, Métis people? They're told that they're part of this, you know, consultation process and whatnot. So yeah, there's a lot of issues that need correcting here, and I just wanted to share those. So miigwech.
So maybe if I could just close with this message. When you look at this country 50, 60 years ago, there was no identification of any Métis in this country, in this part of the country, in Ontario. Why was that? It's because there was no benefit. But now there is benefit. On the backs of the First Nation people who've worked so hard to create better lives for our First Nations, now these organizations that are forming are seeing benefit to being Indigenous. And they're trying to capitalize on our trauma, on our history, on our hard work, And it's got to stop, and it's going to stop. Miigwech.
We have one more question, sorry, from the Canadian Press. We could hear you.
Oh, sorry. Alessia from the Canadian Press. I'm just trying to get some more clarity on the question that Karen had asked about the timing of this press conference. Why is this the focus? Was M&O speaking at this conference? Like, why is this the main priority for First Nations in Ontario right now?
For me, we talked about the signing of that agreement today between our nations, there's only so much of what I would call the First Nations pie to go around. And I want, again, this conference and the industry to know that the money that they're going to assign to the First Nations or to an Indigenous result has to go to the real rights holders. So that's why today, that's why the timing. I spoke with Jackie and the team from COO, and I said, we have to get the message to industry because industry is confused. Industry is being forced to deal with the Métis question. And they come back to me and they say, Jason, who are these people? I don't even know who to talk to. They blow in from Toronto from an office and they well, my project's in the middle of your territory. I get it. It's beside your community. And yet I'm being told to talk to these other folks. And industry doesn't understand it. So I want to be clear with industry. And I want our political leadership to be clear with industry. And I want Ontario to say something to industry about dealing with the rights, the proper rights holders. Listen, my brother is the Deputy Minister of Mines, and he and I have conversations about this. And I said, you're welcome to come beside me today and say your piece on this. And I'm sorry for throwing him under the bus while he's not here. But I want to hear from Ontario on this issue. I want them to finally say, we did our homework with respect to the mining and engagement and consultation. And you know what? You don't have to, industry, consult with those folks because they don't exist. There is no impact. You know, when we were in the INAN committee against Bill C-53, which we celebrate the defeat of, and thanks again to COO and others for organizing that fight, we defeated that bill. But my point is that we have to stop engaging. It's getting in the way of good progress with mining industry. First Nations are making hard compromises and hard choices, and the M&O is getting in the way of that. And they're going to force different decisions by our communities, my communities, who have worked so long and so hard to get to where they are thinking about abandoning support for mining operations that deal with the M&O because it gives them a foothold, and we can't have it. The more that industry recognizes their place, Ontario recognizes their place, and then we're stuck with it. It's like, you know, inviting Dracula into your house, right? Then he's in. And we can't have that, as the chief said. We've got to stamp it out. Industry needs to know, and there's power in the investment community here, and they can convince, you know, Premier Ford that, well, maybe not so much. Maybe if we want to keep this, you know, positive engagement going with the rights holders in Ontario, we got to stop doing this and you know, getting industry on board and taking that message back because they are confused. They're as confused and I would say in certain instances as miffed as we are on this issue. So thank you.
Alyssa, one more point on that as to the timing and why here, why now. We're fighting this battle on many fronts. As Jason talked about the Indigenous funding pie, well, that pie doesn't get any bigger. It only gets smaller when you have these groups wanting to take pieces of this pie away from us. And mining is only one aspect. We're talking child welfare, we're talking healthcare, we're talking housing, we're talking education. All of that money that's earmarked for the actual First Nations in Ontario are going to the M&O. Part of it is going to the M&O. And so we came here because the mining sector is also another big section of where that money is being redirected to false organizations such as the M&O. And this is the single most largest meeting throughout the year in Ontario regarding mining. So that's why we're here now. But it's not, definitely in no way is it only about mining.
Is it on? No, I would just have to concur with what has already been said. This is mining. There's a huge push. We with Ford's announcements and that, there's a huge push right now for mining, as normally there was, but there seems to be exponentially right now. So why now? Because it is affecting our everyday, which has been said already. And right now, mining is the hot topic, so this is how we are going to get heard. This is about our fight, our long fight, and about Ontario doing their homework. They have yet to do their homework, and we've been pushing them on doing their homework because they can't tell us how they came to exist, because we asked them to walk us through the process that would have had led to their existence, and we have yet to hear for that. And I think that question, I asked that question over a year ago, and we're still waiting for that response. So the government needs to be put on notice as well in regards to how we're going to be dealing with this, because what we want to do, and which has already been said before, is create certainty. And doing business with the M&O in Ontario right now, as it comes to mining, you will not create certainty. We can guarantee that. So, miigwech.
Thanks, Chief. And we have a further question from the Canadian Press Online.
Yeah, I'm wondering what, if any, conversations have been happening with the Ontario government. You're talking to industry right now. What's the next steps here?
For us, it's, Ontario, unfortunately, is continuing their policy. And, somebody mentioned, Chief Frappier is mentioning, trying to convince them to simply look at the facts. We sit at the Canadian INAN committee, and when the Indian Affairs official was asked, well, who told you that they existed in Ontario? Where'd you get your information from? And you know what he said? Well, we relied on the information that came from M&O. And the senator or the MP, Ontario, Canada's official said, well, you mean you didn't ask anybody else? You simply went with what you were told by what we would call the perpetrator? Yeah, the answer is yeah. So whatever M&O said goes. And nobody actually looked behind the curtain to see what was really going on. And so Ontario, and I think there's certainly a rush to reconciliation. And we have to appreciate that, Ontario and the industry and folks are making best efforts to come to grips with all the trauma that's been perpetrated on our communities. But you have to do it with consideration to the real rights holders, and we have to realign those reconciliation pieces to where they naturally and truly belong. And so, with respect to Ontario, in our case, it might end up in court. If that's where they want to go, and that's what we're preparing for, that's what our communities are investing in, and you heard it from some of my colleagues in the room. We have to take on the fight, because the way this thing plays out, as Chief McLeod has said, is that everybody's Indigenous. And nobody's. We have a special right. They call us First Nations because we were here first. My grandpa signed the treaty. My dad was a chief. I know who we are. I don't have to fake it. So we have to take these pretenders and put them to the side so that Ontario and Canada can start to focus more on the rights holders and get the reconciliation with our communities properly done. The hundreds of millions of dollars that are being wasted, the taxpayers should be pissed off that this is happening. That money could go to our communities to help us. So, I guess that's my answer.
And just to add to that, I think, if any of these organizations or any of these people have any claims of any type of title in our territories, it's not the Ontario government who decides whether or not they have those rights in our lands. They need to come to us and make those claims, and we will determine who was there and who wasn't there and who may have rights, because Canada and Ontario only have rights in our territories because we gave them permission. And so they cannot go to them and ask for permission. They need to be respecting the First Nations in the territories that they claim to be part of, and find out from them whether or not they are accepted.
And just, thank you. I got up. I think that it's really important, well, as far as the next step for Ontario is to keep on pushing, to see how they've gained this recognition. You know, as the Tamiagam Anishinaabe, when we went to the Supreme Court of Canada, we talked about material culture, we talked about our distinct language, we talked about our governance structure, we talked about our kinship structure, we talked about all of these things that made us Tamiagam Anishinaabe. I asked that question to the MNO. What makes you the MNO? And how are you connected here? They use our stories. They use our history. They use our people to say that they're them. That's not okay. You know, like Chief McLeod was speaking to, this is colonization 2.0. You know, this is now they are trying to be us. So that's all I have to say to that, but we continue the fight with Ontario as well.
Any further questions from the floor or online? Okay, well, thank you all so much for attending. Thank you so much, Chiefs and Jason. We have some leave behind documents if you're looking for some additional information, and we're around. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Miigwech Kinawea.